Welcome back, and today I'm going to be doing my definitive edition tutorial for the sliding doors, and I'm going to go ahead and cover it here in the intro, so that way, even though I do talk about it in the video, I have timestamps, and that's for each of the different types of doors. There's going to be 3, and I'm going to cover the exact scripting for each of the doors. So if you do happen to watch the entire tutorial, you might find it a little repetitive, considering I do copy pretty much the same script for all 3 doors just about. But I didn't want the viewer to have to scramble through a different part of the tutorial to find out what nodes go where and how things work. So that's why I've included it this way for the definitive edition tutorial. So with nothing else, let's jump right into this thing. Okay, so you'll see that I have 3 different doors here. That's because there are 3 different methods to opening the door, how I have it set up here. I'm going to go through each one all the way. I'm going to leave timestamps in the video so that way you can skip to the door that benefits your map the most. If you do watch the full tutorial, you might find me being a bit repetitive with the scripting because they each share very similar nodes and a similar setup. But I don't want the viewer to have to switch back and forth between 2 different parts of the tutorial in order to get the door they want. So I'm going to cover the full script for each door as I get to them. So you will not need to jump around and you only have to view the part of the video that fits you. So to start, I'm going to start with the button door. You open the door with a button, and I'm going to clear this so that way you can see how it goes from the start. Let's grab a button. You can pick any button. For me, this one will be the 1. I'm going to name this door button for obvious reasons. And there we go. You want to make sure that it is not a one-time use if you want the door to open again with the same button. The door needs to be a dynamic object. And of course, that is for anything in scripting. If it's an object, it has to be dynamic. And you don't have to use a door object. You can make any object in the game a sliding door or whatever, as long as it's a dynamic object. But I choose a door just because it fits and looks pretty nice. So with that, we can bring our button and our door into our node graph with Y. Okay, so let's grab our button, since that is what we're going to be using to start the process. And we're going to go to Events Custom and grab On Object Interacted. Perfect. We don't want the button to be pressed again while the door is opening, otherwise it might get off track. And to do that, we need to delete the button. And you'll see why we're deleting it and why it won't be a big deal at the end. We're going to use a second button in place of it, but I'm going to save that to the end since it's not related to scripting at all. So the next one we're going to use is actually getting the door to move. And that node is in Objects Transform. At the bottom, it's called Translate Object to Point. You're going to plug it in right there. Grab our object here, put it in there, and there we go. Just like that, that's our door that's going to be moving. And let's see, we're going to set up some settings on it first before we get the position. It's going to take about 2 seconds for the door to move. The movement curve is going to be linear. That way it's the most basic and opens at a regular speed. And right now, it won't do anything because we need a position. This one is where it becomes different from my previous tutorial. We are not going to be using an external object to get the position we need. We're going to go to Variables Basic and grab a Vector 3 node. One single node. This saves on a little bit of map, memory space, budget, and some node space and node budget. So we're going to grab a Vector 3 and zero out all these numbers. In order to get that position, because what that is now doing is it is getting an exact point in the map somewhere, an exact coordinate. And to get that exact coordinate, we're actually going to be inputting our door's position. So the X value will be my door's X position, which will be 75.65. The Y value is going to be 35.14. And then the Z value is 505.03. Perfect. Now, if we press the button, it's not going to go anywhere because it's already in this exact position. what we needed to do was get that number in there, so that way the only thing that was changed is the value of the axis that it will be moving on. Are we moving it up or down? Then it will be on the z-axis. Depending on which door way your door is facing, it might go this way and your y value change, or if it's facing this way, your x value will change. And that is what we're going to be looking for. I want mine to go to the right, so I'm going to be going this way, and you'll notice only my y value is changing. I want it to go to about 28. 28 looks like it's going to go to about right there. So all we need to do is type that exact coordinate in, and for me it will be positive 28. You may end up with a negative number depending on where you're at in the map. So if I move this over here, notice we're in negatives. But we're not going to be going all the way over there. But if you do, that's perfectly fine. Negative numbers are fine. So now, as it stands, if we press this button, that door is going to only slide on the y-axis about to the value that I have set. Yep. And the button disappears. The door is now permanently open. So if that's what you wanted, that's all you need. But we want it to open again, and we want it to close as well. So in order to do that, unless you want the door to immediately start closing after it reaches, the position being fully open, then you're going to need to go to logic and grab a wait for in seconds, just like that. And then we're gonna have to wait for 1 second because you wouldn't believe how long that 1 second feels like. We're gonna copy these two nodes, just like that right there. Copy. Paste it right here. And then plug it in just like that. Now plug in our object to the door because the door is what's going to be moving back. And everything is pretty much the same, it's including this, but we want this to go back, right? So all we need to do is change the value that we changed the first time back to where the object is originally at in its closed position. For me, that is 3514 on the y-axis. And we want the button to come back, so let's go to objects, and at the very, very, very bottom, spawn object. And we're gonna plug that in here, and then grab our object input and give it to our button. So now our button will come back after the door is fully closed, and we can open it again. There we go. It'll wait for 1 second. It closes just like that, and the button is back, and it will repeat. So the last thing that I mentioned was the other button. I'm going to duplicate this button actually. I'm going to name this door button dummy because it's to serve as just an object on the map. I'm going to set it to one-time use only because it will allow you to interact with it, although it will do nothing in the script functional wise or anything. But that way, you don't have the problem of it trying to, push over and over and over again and nothing happening. Because sometimes it might get in the way of this, because we're going to put the button in the exact same position as the real button. So that way whenever the button deletes itself, you won't even notice. But since they're in the same position, you might accidentally put the wrong button at first. See, the door didn't open because that wrong button was there, but now that it's a one-time use, you'll never have that problem again. Because they've changed buttons since I've been back to scripting, and you can't start them off, you can't turn them off except by doing that, unfortunately. But that is the only caveat to that. But there you go. Notice the button does not change. Perfect, you can't even tell that it spawned or despawned. And that is your door. That is your first door, fully set up completely. There you go, there's a good look at the script, and that's all you need for that. Okay, so moving on to the next one. This one is going to be a way for the player to just walk up to the door and it will open for them. Very similar to my original tutorial. And to do that, you're going to need a pointer. And I have one here. I named it door zone. You need to make sure that it has a boundary. And I set it to box, and I kind of have it covering both sides of the door pretty well. And you can change it. 11 seems pretty good. And yeah, just make sure that the shape is about what you want for the door to realize there's a player there. And for me, that's pretty good. Of course, you want to make sure that your door is dynamic, otherwise it will not work. You do not have to use any object that is said that it's a door, but it will work. Any object that is dynamic will work as a door if you want it to. But for me, I just use a door because it looks nice. So let's grab both of these. And we're going to jump into our node graph and start this. Bring them into the node graph with Y, and door zone. That is what we're going to be kicking this off with. So, since it is an area monitor, we're going to go to events and on object entered area. We can't just plug in our monitor object here, unfortunately. So we're going to go to events, not events, variables basic, and the very first node, area monitor. There we go, just like that. You're going to plug the area monitor in from this node to this node, and the volume object, which is our pointer, is going to be this one. Now, we don't want the door to constantly open and close depending on if a player is entering the zone. So to do that, we're going to delete the zone after the player enters it, so that way it doesn't get the door off track. So grab delete object from objects, and then plug your door into it. Now we can get the door to move. And to do that, we need to go to Objects Transform and go to the very bottom, Translate Object to Point. Plug it in just like that. The object that will be moving is our door, and that's down here. We're going to place it up here on top of this. I didn't really give it a spicy name or anything, just a door name that the game gave it. Anyway, the position will work with last, but for this, we're going to change the settings. It's going to take about 2 seconds to open, and I'm going to give it a linear movement curve. That way it just stops at the same speed. The speed is universally the same when it's moving. Now, to get that position, we're actually not going to be using any external object to get the position. I'm going to go to Variables Basic and grab a Vector3 variable. This allows us to save on map budget and node budget by only using one node, and you do not need an external object to set this up. Perfect. I'm going to zero all those out because what we're going to do now is get our door's position. You see that position down there at the bottom of the screen? We're going to be putting those numbers into the X, Y, and Z values respectively here. And for me, it was 75.65 for that X value. The Y value is 964. And then 505.03 for the door, or Z axis of the door. There we go. And you'll notice though that the door, if we were to do this right now, the door will not move because it's going to the exact position it's already sitting at. What we needed that for is so that way we don't have to input it later. So to do this, we're actually going to be duplicating this and setting it over here, because this will be when the door returns to its origin or its closed position. So now that we have this, we're safe and we can change this number over here without too much worry on remembering what's what. So now that we have this, depending on which way you want to go with the door is the axis you're going to change. If you want to go up or down, that is the Z axis. If you want to go, well, depending on which way your door is facing, if it's facing this way, you'll be going on the Y axis. If it is facing this way, you'll be going on the X axis. For me, I want it to go to the right. So I'm going to grab this and I'm only going to go to the right, and about right here is where I want the door. So I'm going to pay attention to where that is. I'm going to set it to 2. I'm going to pay attention to what value the Y says, because that is exactly where it will be going. Because if I set it to something like -28, that's exactly where the door is going. So it's going to be just +2 in this instance. So let's change that Y value to 2. And now the door will function. But notice it opened anyway, because we have to actually designate if it's a player that is entering the zone, because as the game spawns the objects, it treats the door frame and this pointer and everything as an object entering it. But we don't want it to do that, we need it to be a player. So let's go to players and get isPlayer. That is what we want, is the object entering this area a player. Then it will do something. To do that, we just go to logic and grab a branch and plug it in right here. Just like that. We're going to go from if true because we want it to be a player. If it is not a player, the door will not open, it will not do anything. It will not run the script to open the door. So now when you see, there we go. And of course the door will stay open indefinitely, permanently actually, not indefinitely, because that's the way we have it set up. But you want the door to close again. And in order to do that, all we need to do is duplicate this and move it over here. because unless you want the door to close immediately or start closing immediately after it opens up all the way, then you can add a pause in here with wait for n seconds from the logic category and plug it in between these two nodes. And we're going to make it wait for 1 second because you wouldn't believe how long that 1 second feels like when waiting for this door to open. So now we need to plug in our original vector3 variable that has our object's normal, regular closing position coordinates into the position here, plug that in there. And then the object that's going to be moving is our door because it's going to be closing, and that's it. Now we need to spawn our door monitor back. We need to spawn our monitor back so that way after it's all said and done, you can walk through the door again, because if you don't, the door will close and lock forever because there will be no way for it to open. But now we have it. The door functions flawlessly now. And you'll see that it'll close after 1 second. Then we can walk back into it. And there you go. And see, nothing happens if you walk into it while it's open, but if you walk into it while it's closed, then it will. But none of this is affected. It doesn't hurt anything. Perfect. So there's your sliding door with an area monitor. Now this last one is actually very important because while you can make these two doors across your whole map, you will actually have to go into the scripting to change their exact coordinates that the door is moving to, which could take some time and just a little extra tedious work that some people may not want to do. That is why I come up with this door right here. It has a few extra nodes, but you can duplicate this door and move it anywhere in your map, and it will function flawlessly without changing a single setting. With these, if you were to try to duplicate these, then unfortunately, if you did not change any settings, you'll notice that the door acts a little funny. Yeah, it's just shooting all the way over there, and then when it closes, it's going to go to where that door is, because with this door, the coordinates are exact. They are like exact to where the door will go only to a specific point in the map. With this though, you'll see why it works the way it works. So let's jump right into this one. The only thing I changed here was, of course, my door, it has to be dynamic, and I put a boundary on it. And to do that, most objects, if they're dynamic, are able to have a boundary. For this one, luckily it is a door, so it has the boundary starts toward the bottom. I have it set to where players can kind of get in there. It's a little smaller in the back, but it's good enough that the player can walk up to it and it will work just fine. And that is the only thing I changed with the object. Of course, the name I didn't change, but you might want to. With that, let's bring this into the node graph and let's show you the special thing about this door. So press Y to bring the door into the node graph, and since it will be walking through an area monitor, we're going up here to get an events on object entered area, and we can't just plug our door into the area monitor, unfortunately. Even though it is a volume, we need to get from variables basic area monitor, so that way it knows for sure that the object we're talking about is an area monitor. Okay, and then we can plug it in just like that. So from there we need to figure out if it was a player that entered, but there's more than just that. Before we get to that, we are actually going to be setting up a trinity this time of the declare, get, and set variables from variables advanced. And in this case, we're going to be grabbing declare boolean variable. It's the very first node. I'm going to put it up here. And I'm going to name this closed because we want the game to know that the door is, if the door is closed or not. And the reason why we're doing it like this, make sure it says initial value is true, is because we can't just delete the door the same way that we can delete a pointer for an area monitor to not mess up the door. But it's worth it. So we have this. The scope needs to be local. Otherwise, if you duplicate this, they're all going to be sharing that, and if a door is open over here, then this will still function when it shouldn't be. Or if a door is closed over here, then it will function very weird. It will not function right. So you want to make sure that each script brain has its own unique closed variable, and that is this right here. That's why you want to make sure it's local. Okay, So now that we have that, now we can grab get is player, because we want to make sure that only a player can activate this door, or an AI. You can also do that, but in this case I'm going to show the player, because if not, it will count this as an object entering, because the game starts and it will act funny. So we want to make sure it's only a player. So we need that, and when we have that, that means we also need a branch. So go to logic and grab a branch and plug it in right about here, just like that. But we're clearing this because we actually need one more to make sure that the door, it's checking to see if the door is closed or not. So let's go to variables advanced and grab get boolean variable. And now we have this. Make sure that the identifier matches the same as your declare boolean variable, and so to do that, we're going to name it closed. And the scope has to be local, has to match. And now this one is set up. The object does not matter. Okay, so since we have two of these things, we need to plug into one branch. Then we need a Boolean logic. It's the very first node in the logic category, and it allows us to take two things and see if they're both true, or if one or the other is true, or neither. In this case, we want both of these to be true, so we're going to grab from and plug that into the condition. So is it a player and is the door closed? Yes. Then something will happen, and the thing that's going to happen is the door is going to now open. So to do that, let's go to objects transform. Grab translate object to point. Place it right here actually, because we need to make sure that the game is going to know that the door is now opening. So we need one node in between these, and it is our last of the trinity, which is set boolean variable. Set boolean variable. Plug it in right here, just like that. And the identifier needs to match, the scope needs to match, and now the door is not open, so it's actually going to be false. The door is not closed, so it's going to be false. Is it closed? No, it's not. So now the game knows that it is open, so this will not function anymore until this says true. But now that it says false, if we walk into this door right here, it won't do anything while it's open, so we don't have to worry about the monitor messing up the door, getting it off track. So to get the door to actually move, we need to plug in our door. And so let's plug in our door here to the object. The position we'll get in just a moment. We're going to set this to 2 seconds. It's going to move for about 2 seconds, it's not very long. Linear movement curve, just so that way it has the same speed from start to finish. And the position is a little different than before. To do this one, we're actually going to go back to objects, transform, and get object position. And I'm going to place it right about here. And the position we're getting is the door's position. And we need to grab now from the math category, add vectors. Because we're going to be adding something to the door's position. We don't have to specify a specific position in the map. We're simply going to be adding something to its current position. So let's go and get from our vector3 variable from variables basic. There we go. Depending on which way you want your door, if you want it to go left or right, that was the exact opposite of left or right. But anyway, depending on which way your door is facing is either the y-axis, or if it's facing this way, it'll be the x-axis. And of course, up or down is the z-axis. For me, I want it to go to the right, and to do that, it's going to go to about -23. And what do I have currently? -16. Okay, so to do that, let's go to our y value. In my case, it's the y value. Zero all these out. You want to make sure only to type a number in to the axis that it will be moving. For me, that is the y-axis. And I'm going to put -7 because where I want it to go is about -7. It's 16 right now, -16, and -23 is where I want it. So that's about -7 of a difference. So now we need to put a little bit of a wait period, so that way the door will not just immediately start closing as soon as it reaches all the way open. So I'm going to put a wait for n seconds after that node, and we're going to make it wait for 1 second because it does seem a lot longer than 1 second when you do that. So we're only going to duplicate this node right here. and we're going to plug it in right here. So translate object to point, that is what you want to duplicate, and just plug in everything like before. So the object that's going to move is the door, and these settings should still be the same. The position, we're actually going to add just a couple more nodes here, just one more for this part though. Let's go to math, and instead we're going to be doing the opposite of adding, which is subtracting, because since adding it opened it, subtracting will close it. So just like the add node, we're going to add operand A as the object's position, and then the vector3 variable is what we're subtracting. So let's go ahead and put this back here. And there we go. You plug that in right here, and then it will close and go back to its original position. The last node we need is set Boolean variable from variables advanced, and plug it in at the very end, and make sure the identifier matches. It's going to be closed like the others. We're going to be setting it back to true. Make sure the scope is local, because now when this is done, the door will be closed. So is it closed? Yes, this will switch it back. So now after it's closed, the script will function again. So that way it only functions when the door is closed. And that'll do it. Perfect. And notice I'm walking back into the area monitor, but it's not messing anything up because the variable says that the door is closed or open. But it works fine whenever it is closed. Perfect. Now what makes this special is we can actually duplicate this without changing a single setting, and we can duplicate it as many times as we want, and put it wherever we want. Oops. That's weird. Anyway. So here we go. And I can test these all out, and you'll notice that each one of these doors functions independently of one another flawlessly, no matter where we put it in the map, without changing a single setting whatsoever in the script, or for the object for that matter. So there you go. That's mainly for if you have a map that has a lot of doors that are identical to one another. They all function exactly the same. They're all the same door, but for different locations. That's the perfect setup for you, because you can now safely put this door anywhere and everywhere on your map, and it will function just fine. Well, and there it is. Hopefully that was easy enough to follow with the timestamps and everything included. That's just the second of course, many definitive edition tutorials that I'm going to be doing in times to come. And of course, to reiterate, I am doing other content now, including campaign playthroughs. So if you have a recommendation, you can go ahead and leave those in the comments as well, and I'll check them out. And that should just about cover it. I'm not really sure what the next definitive edition tutorial is going to be, but, well, you'll know what it is when it gets uploaded. So I'll see you guys on the next one. I'm out of here.